Hi everybody, I'm Zilla Blitz and welcome. Today we're going to take a look at Tattered Flags Volume I, Into the Whirlpool, designed by Herman Lutman and published by Blue Panther Games. This game is a hybrid between miniatures and board game that focuses on the fighting around Rose's wheat field at Gettysburg on July 2nd, 1863 in the American Civil War. Let's jump right in and get started taking a look. So here is Into the Whirlpool spread out in front of us. Let's do a quick overview before we jump in and take a look at the individual parts to this game. As I mentioned in the intro, this game focuses on the American Civil War, Gettysburg, July 2nd, this specific day in the battle. And here is Rose's wheat field. And this centers among the fighting around this wheat field on that day. And specifically, it was Sickles' Union 3rd Corps and then the Confederate 1st Corps led by Longstreet. So this simulates a number of the engagements that happened over the course of that day on July 2nd, 1863. Now, this is a two-player game. Looks like it's going to work fairly well. Solitaire, I'll talk more about that as we kind of break apart the components and take a look at them. Gameplay length is 2 to 3 hours, although I suspect some of the longer scenarios might push that limit. And then the historical length of each one of the scenarios in the game, and there are 6, we'll take a closer look at those when we look at the scenario book, is 1 to 4 hours. There's a learning scenario that is 4 turns. Each turn is 15 minutes, roughly 15 minutes in the game. And so the longest one is 16 turns, so 4 hours. And then the unit scale. So there is a brigade influence here, a brigade organizational level. Then there's the heart of the game really is probably, is fair to say, I think, the regimental level. But individual counters represents fractions of a regiment. So the rules mention that each individual counter represents about 110 men, or if it's artillery, about 2 to 3 batteries. But you might have 2, 3, 4, 5 different counters that make up one regiment. And the regiment really is what's going to kind of adhere to what they call formation integrity. So there's a counter, regiment, and brigade level influence in this game, but very much tactical around the engagements happening on July 2nd in this day. And for scale representation, the spacing between the kind of the symbols on the map here, and we'll talk about that, is about 50 yards per one. So this distance between my fingers right here is about 50 yards. So there is a lot to talk about with mechanics. This is a very unique game. Again, it mentions in kind of the description materials that this is a blend of miniatures and board gaming, and I think that's a very fair and apt description of this. There are no hexes. There are 8 pointed symbols on the map, and you place your units, which are rectangular, on top of these symbols to point in directions like north, northeast, east, southeast, south, etc. Any one of those 8 directional fractions. And you're going to be maneuvering these units on those positions as they move through. So it's very much got a miniatures type feel for it. There is also fields of fire zones basically. So they're going to extend out from the unit in a certain direction, which also feels very miniature-esque as you're kind of reading the rules and looking at how it's going to play here. So a very unique game. If you like miniatures and are looking for kind of an innovative board game, this might be something you might want to check out for those reasons there. Now, it's a Civil War game, so as one would expect, we have a lot of the traditional morale elements. Units are going to be fresh. If they get damaged, you're going to flip them over to a battle-worn side, so there's 2 steps really to the counters themselves. There is disrupted units, shattered units, and there's an entire rally level. Now, going with that too, their units have experience ratings anywhere from 1 to 5. Leaders have experience ratings. And a very important part of it, we've got, formations, command, and brigade level leadership. So all of these traditional elements of a Civil War game are represented in this game. Another unique element of this game is what they call formation integrity, which is a restrictive chain for all the different pieces in a regiment. So they basically have to stay adjacent to each other, otherwise they can't do very much. So you really aren't going to be able to move units all over the place. You kind of have to keep your formational integrity and act in that way. So units from a particular regiment are going to have to stick together. There's one that says, if you can't keep them together and do something, that unit can't move. So formational integrity is a huge element here, and I think interesting to see how that plays out as you maneuver through the game. More traditional elements that we would expect, there's a close combat phase, so kind of an assault phase. There's a fire combat phase in the game. The game flow goes by brigade level activation. So basically, and you're going to alternate back. The rough essence of gameplay is when you get into the meat of a turn, the Union player is going to activate one brigade, give them an order, execute that order for that brigade, and then it's going to flip to the Confederate forces, and they're going to activate at the brigade level and give some orders to their brigade, and then it's going to go back and forth like that over the course of a turn. So it's going to have a very nice back and forth ebb and flow, I think, to the game as you dig in and play. Battle cards play a factor as well. You get dealt 2 at the beginning of the game, and then anytime you roll doubles on the 10-sided dice, you get to draw another card. And they have some default actions, and they also have some unique events on them. Most cards come with a Confederate or a Union event, and depending on which side you are, you can use those events in various ways. Unit movement can suffer from traffic congestion, and as we might guess with a tactical level scale, we've got 50 yards to the spaces between the units. There is visibility, line of sight, and some elevation that can play in here. So there's a line of sight system that you're going to be managing as you play the game. Other traditional American Civil War elements, artillery, there's limbered or an unlimbered state for artillery. We also have 4 10-sided dice in the game, and mechanically, this means that the game is going to have a percentage-based hit system. So you're going to end up with, for example, a 75% chance to do damage, and you're going to roll those dice, determine a 0 to 100 number, 1 to 100 number, and then that's going to be the result of that action. So everything goes down to percentages in terms of die roll modifiers and all these elements that are going to be involved with combat. Just to kind of give an idea of the level of detail, there are ammunition types are modeled as well in this game, so there's a good bit of complexity in this game. To get a better idea of the game, let's take a look at the documentation here. We get 2 documents, the scenario book and then the rule book. Rule book is 36 pages. We've got set in single column, fairly large text. Now, it's important to note that the designer of this game is Herman Luttmann, who is the designer of my Wargame of the Year last year, A Most Fearful Sacrifice. So we do have a very experienced, prestigious designer working on this game, and I think it shows up in the rule book. And as I was looking through, I've read probably about half the rules so far. This is a very clearly explained, articulate game that I think you're going to be able to pick up without any hindrances from the rule writing or the rule organization. Having said that, as we looked at that list of mechanics in the game, there is a fair bit of stuff going on. I mean, these rule sections get fairly robust, and we do have 36 pages of rules with, again, some here and some graphics scattered around here and there. To give an idea of this, I thought we could take a look here at Fire Combat, which starts on page 16, and it runs 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 7.5 pages. So there's, this gives you an idea of some of the complexity inside some of these systems. And if we look at the pieces here, we've got flank fire, artillery area fire, point blank smoothbore fire, opportunity fire, applying fire combat hits. They could be hits, murderous fire hits, critical hits, casualties, flank fire, and then artillery area fire, which we mentioned. Then you've got the die roll modifiers on the percentage hit chances. There's a fire combat resolution summary, artillery friendly fire exception, gone to ground units exception. So they're in visibility. So there's the whole visibility system is baked into this firing combat system too. So there's a good bit going on here. I would probably give this game a 5.5 or a 6. And we'll talk about the battle cards. The battle cards are optional. I think if you add the battle cards in, they can kind of intercept the other player's actions, and there's a system for how they work with each other. That, I think, is going to add another layer of complexity into the game. So I would probably give this even maybe a 6, 6.5 if you opt to play with the battle cards in the game. But again, Herman Luttmann is the designer here, so I think even though the rules may be complex, there is clarity and precision in terms of how the rule set is executed. Let's jump in now and take a little bit of a look at the scenario book. Not as much to say about the scenarios as the rules. There are 6 scenarios, varying in length and depth. And the first one here is Scenario 1, which is your learning scenario, 4 turns only, and a relatively small number of units. Then we go into Scenario 2. This one here is 5 turns long. And there is a number here that they go through. They list them here, wheat and stone, another part of the engagements. This one is a 5-turn scenario. Scenario 4, the Whirlpool of Death. They gradually get bigger as we go along. This is 6 to 8, so that would be 9 turns, 2 hours, so a medium level scenario. Then Scenario 5, the Bloody Wheat Field. These are the bigger ones. I think this is the historical one. Yeah, 4:15 and 8 o'clock, so this is a 16-turn scenario. Scenario 6 here, Reaping the Wheat, is a free-for-all fictional meeting engagement. It can be as large or as small as the players wish it to be. So it's a little bit of a design-your-own scenario, free-form type of scenario using the map, the counters, and the system. Counter time, 2.5 counter sheets printed on both sides. So one side of the units has their normal state and then the ready state, and then the other side has a battle-worn state. And there are other states that units can fall into, and you basically mark them with various markers along there. About half of the counters here are units, and about half, a little bit more than half, are markers that you'll be using. We can see Confederate forces here. Now these are, punch one out here so we can take a look. These are rectangular in shape, and they are 1 inch wide by 1/2 inch tall. Various amounts of, not a ton of information on these. The top left 4 is the experience rating. Then we've got how many, this is the second unit of 4 in this regiment, and then this is the brigade number on the top right, and then 7th Carolina is the historical name, and we can see the other 7th Carolina units down here below there. We've got some disruption markers here. I like these. These are laser cut counters. Got a nice heft to them. I feel really tactical and fun to move around. So I think this is a really clean counter set here. Then a lot of units here. We've got the Union forces, of course, in blue, Confederate in this butternut color. More cute. So another big counter sheet here. These are basically all of our units. Then as we get to our third counter sheet, we start to run into the markers, and these are 5/8 of an inch wide. And these down here are various leaders, Union leaders and Confederate leaders. Very nice counter set, and we should take a look as we look at the map. I'll pull a couple of these out and show how they orient on the map and how they will sit in this miniatures / board game type of a system. Player aids. We have 2 identical player aids, one for each player. Let's take a look at one of them to highlight some of the systems that are in the game. Here we've got the sequence of play, brigade order, unit actions. So as a brigade, you're going to be giving it the same order to your entire brigade, and that will limit what they can do. Assault, engage, defend, maneuver, regroup. And over here we have change orders, initiative results, number of unit actions, formation unit morale test tables, movement, reorganization, fire combat tables here. Lots of tables, as we can see, bayonet. But this is very typical, I think, of an American Civil War game. And we can see, of course, that everything here is in percentages. So that's going to be using that 4 dice system, the 10-sided dice, to generate percentage numbers. Fire combat hit types. So a lot of stuff going on, but the charts here bring a lot of the numerical information together. These are nice and clean, kind of a normal card stock, a little bit of a thicker card stock folded in the middle here, and very nice big text on these too, so easy to read. Another simple player aid here. This is a thinner card stock, and this is game turn track and then your terrain chart over here. Our last player aid are the scenario setup guides. There are 3, these are done on a thinner card stock. There are 3 of them. Each one, except for the third one, is 2-sided. So you've got scenario setup guides for 5 of the 6 scenarios. We mentioned when we looked at the scenario guide that the 6th scenario is a free-form kind of design your own scenario that doesn't really need a setup guide. So there is none for that one. Scenario 1 here we can see is the first contact, so a relatively small amount of units. This is your learning scenario, only 1 hour in length and a relatively small amount of units. Then scenario 2, still a smaller scenario, gets a little bit bigger perhaps. The Downeaster's Wall, so that one's there. And then scenario 3, they start to get meaty here. Wheat and Stone. You can see a lot of Union forces here, a lot of Confederate forces. Then scenario 4, the ominously named A Whirlpool of Death. It's where you're really bringing a much larger force to the game, and this is a longer scenario too. Then scenario 5, the Bloody Wheat Field. This one only has a few Confederate forces on at the start, so there must be a reinforcement guide for that one, because there are a ton of Union forces out here. That would be a very one-sided affair if these are the only Confederate forces you've got here. Oh, down here it does list the reinforcement lists. There we go. So that makes sense. Let's take a look at our battle cards. There are 40 of them in the deck, and they generally follow 2 different styles. We've got some generic ones that are good for each side. They also have a default action down the bottom. We can see these basic default actions they can be used for. Then these here have a Confederate or a Union event on them, so depending on which player you are. And the cards tell you what you can do. Before your order step, it gives you specifically what you can do with this card. So this is McLaw issues orders, Caldwell issues orders, Longstreet directs the attack, Sickles directs the defense. And then these cards here, and this is why I think they ramp up the complexity just a little bit, because this is a firefight card. It can be played after the enemy fire combat. So you can be dropping these cards into the game at what you think is the most opportune moment. And this, your unit that was just targeted may issue fire combat back at the enemy unit that fired at it. Your unit fires as if conducting a normal fire combat using all its unit's actions. Ammo problems can be used before the enemy fire combat. Before an enemy unit issues fire combat for any reason, decrease the 2-hit percentage by 20%. So again, these are, you're going to try to time these right. They're going to add a little bit of complexity to the game, and how they interact with the rules and combat could create a little bit more complexity in the game. So I'd probably bump the complexity up a half star, if you would, for integrating these into the game. But certainly you can play games and then add these in later because they are an optional rule. But I really like these types of events in a game. Now these cards that you mentioned, these are not vinyl cards. These are more the kind of paper-based cards. They're cardstock, but a thinner cardstock. I would probably sleeve these because I think these are going to get a lot of use if you play the game quite a bit. And we should mention our dice. 4 10-sided dice to get the percentages that you need. So, blue and white, I think each player would roll one of each to get your tens digit and then your ones digit here. Last but certainly not least, our very interesting combat mat. Now this is a vinyl type of combat mat here. So it doesn't feel like a paper-based one. It's got some sort of kind of a woven fabric in it. So it feels almost like a little bit more of an old-fashioned map that you might get here. I like the feel of it. I think it's going to be fairly durable, and it's a very interesting design. I've seen another Blue Panther game that has this type of a mat in it, and it seems to work out pretty well. And I think it's might want some plexiglass to get it to lay perfectly flat, but I suspect it will flatten out with time too. But that's enough on the material composition of the map. Let's talk about the map itself. Roughly 17 inches by 21 inches, and I flipped the dimensions here. It orients with a 90-degree turn, but to get it to show up in the video better, I flipped it a little bit. We can see woods, we've got the road, the stream here, the centerpiece, Rose's wheat field, Stony Hill over here, elevation terrain markers running through it. Very cool tactical map. I like the kind of the immediacy of it, and it's got somewhat of a miniatures feel to it with the color palette here too. Now, again, we mentioned there are no hexes and there's no areas. We've got these positional stars, and I'll zoom on these in a moment and show how a unit would sit and orient on these. And each one of these in terms of distance is 50 yards apart. So that gives you roughly a scale of this map and the engagements that you're going to be having here. Stacking as well, you can have 2 units on one positional star. They have to be the same brigade or the same battery, and they have to have the same facing. So there are some, and we talked a little bit in the mechanics stage too about the formational integrity. So you're going to be trying to keep these units together in command and control. There are penalties if you lose formational integrity because of attacks and retreats. So there are some elements in here where you're going to be really trying to coordinate your attacks and your defense in the Civil War type of era, keeping that formational integrity in mind. I think it's going to be a very interesting tactical landscape to maneuver and navigate as a commander and as a player in this game. So we've zoomed in here on Rose's wheat field, and I want to just show how the units sit here. So we brought our 7th Carolina unit out, and we can see these 8 positional stars. And basically what you do is you line it up along the 2 edges of the 8 positional stars, so the point is directing which way the unit is going. And then if they were to turn 45 degrees, they would turn off to the right here. Now, the stacking again is 2 units per hex. It goes like that. And this does determine order. So which one is on top and which one is on the bottom determine which unit is in front of the other unit. And we could have a leader in this area too. And I'm not quite sure how the stacking will work for some of these markers because the markers are a little bit bigger, but I suppose that works out as you get into play. You won't really be able to figure that out until we get into the game and start playing a little bit. I love the visual element of this though. It does have a very miniatures type of feel to it, as well as still being very much a board game. You know, you've got your map and you've got your positional guidance and direction. So I was thinking too, I wonder if someone coming to this from a miniatures background might pick up the rules a little bit easier than someone who hasn't, but that remains to be seen. So there you have it, a little bit of a close-up look at how units sit on the map. And we've gotten through everything in Tattered Flags #1 into the Whirlpool, a full look at all the components and some of the systems in the game. Oh, right, Solitaire. So the battle cards would have some hidden information if you're using them. Again, they're an optional rule. You would be holding those and your opponent wouldn't be able to see them. So there is a little bit of hidden information element there if you're using those. But I think you could play those to the best of your ability playing two-handed. Again, there's no bot here. There isn't any solo system. This is designed as a two-player game. That's the only part of it that I think could be a hindrance playing Solitaire. I would think otherwise, with the alternating activations, this is probably going to be a pretty fun game to play as a Solitaire mode. I don't really see anything that's going to uh, reduce the experience whatsoever. So I'd probably give this a solid 6 out of 10 for Solitaire. Feels like it's going to work pretty well. Let me know if you have any questions. Tattered Flags numbered 1. Seems to me that if the game does well, perhaps there's going to be a number of games in this series. Very curious to see how this one plays, especially coming to the game as someone who doesn't have a deep background in miniatures combat. I'm very curious to see how this feels and how it plays. I love the structure, though, that the board game system provides, and I love the visual elements and some of the movement intricacies of the miniature system. So I'm very curious to get this to the table and give it a play. Happy to answer questions. If you have any, let me know. Thanks for watching, everybody. Have a great day.